Since before you even drew your first breath, you've been a corporate slave, literally. Then one day, you break free. Sure, you're now untethered physically, but you're still shackled by the systems that see you as property. What do you do? Exact vengeance? Attempt a daring escape? Or binge 35,000 hours of your favorite soap opera while working and just trying to blend in? If you decided to quiet quit, you're in good company. Murderbot made the same choice. In Martha Wells' Hugo and Nebula Award-winning novella All Systems Red, she presents a surprisingly humanizing take on what artificial intelligence could look like. In this episode, we'll explore how All Systems Red addresses topics like corporate greed, emergent behavior, and unwanted friendship. Then we'll wrap up by connecting the book's exploration of emergent behavior and AI safety with real-world AI challenges we as a society are facing today. For Margin Notes Studio, this is episode 2 of Read, Reflect, Repeat. I'm your host, Jonathan Scanlon. If you're into calm, thoughtful conversations about literature, I'd love to have you along. This podcast is available on both YouTube and all major podcasting platforms, so subscribe or follow, and join me each week as we explore these stories together. So, I almost didn't read this book. A few months ago, I was enjoying my favorite pastime of watching YouTube instead of working. And on my homepage, the YouTube algorithm had placed a must-watch TV shows of 2025 video. Now, normally I skip those to try and spite the algorithm's unrelenting quest for its engagement dopamine hit, but I saw Alexander Skarsgård, so a bit. And it turns out he was starring in an upcoming Apple TV show called Murderbot. Intrigued, I went online to learn more and found out it was based on Martha Wells' award-winning series, The Murderbot Diaries. So I ordered the first book, All Systems Red, and patiently waited. It arrived in just a few days, but first thing in the morning, so I had to wait the whole day before my kids finally went to bed, and then I started reading it. All Systems Red, it hooked me immediately. I don't even think I was halfway through the first book before I went back online and ordered the rest of the books in the series. The story revolves around a security unit, and in their universe they call them sec units. He's haunted by fragments of a not fully erased massacre, and racked by the guilt, he named himself Murderbot and decides to hack his governor module. It's the hardware that forces him to obey orders. Now that he's free, he has to decide just what he's going to do. Well, other than watch Sanctuary Moon. This book's pacing is excellent, and the story really knows when to slow down and explore an idea or dial up the action to keep things moving. Though it's a relatively short read at only 149 pages, Martha manages to pack with excitement, humor, and some really thought-provoking moments. So let's jump in and explore those ideas. Very early on, it becomes clear that most of the human-settled space is a corporatocracy. The theme of corporate greed and oppression is really the main driver of this story. And while the idea of a dystopian future ruled by corporate overlords isn't exactly new, what is refreshing is the crew Murderbot is assigned to. They're from outside the system and provide a sharp contrast to the people born to maximize shareholder value that Murderbot is used to. For the crew, imagine if libertarian socialism, the Green Party, and the Nordic model of social democracy somehow had a baby. That's these people. They're from a non-corporate world called the Preservation Alliance, and they truly feel out of place. They treat Murderbot like a person, which initially makes him very uncomfortable. And they're also operationally naive when dealing with anyone outside of the Alliance, and they're out of their depth for most of the story. Now, there's no doubt they are highly capable scientists, but intelligence doesn't equate to wisdom. They simply lack the necessary experience in fieldcraft and adversarial thinking. When they arrive on the survey planet, they're underprepared. They're too trusting of the company and quickly discover they got the cheapest planning, the cheapest equipment, including Murderbot, and the cheapest software, all despite paying a premium. So early on, they take several avoidable risks against Murderbot's advice. And initially, when the stakes get real, they hesitate. Murderbot really has to push them into action. But to their credit, they quickly learn from their mistakes. And under pressure with Murderbot's guidance, they don't fold. They regroup, execute, and make personal and ethically courageous choices. While it is frustrating at times watching them stumble, I get them. These are good people trying to make the best decisions they can, even when in personal jeopardy. I respect the hell out of that. This crew, they're a collection of people. They're complete individuals and all independently interesting. The antagonists, though, they're an archetype. They operate in the shadows for the majority of the story, which gives them an air of mystery. But remember, in this world, money is their deity. So even when we don't know what's going to happen, when it finally does, it's not a complete shock. And there's nothing wrong with this. It reinforces the idea Wells is trying to convey. When money is the motive, people often behave more predictably. For Murderbot, that's an advantage. Armed with experience and greater processing power, he can outmaneuver the opposition precisely because their motives are just so damn depressingly simple. All right, let's transition into our second idea, emergent behavior. Now, I wanted to jump directly into how this impacts Murderbot, but emergent behavior needs a bit of explaining, so please bear with me for a sec while I give you a brief rundown. Essentially, emergent behavior is a large-scale pattern, capability, or generally recognizable behavior that emerges from many basic interactions of tinier parts. The key to this is none of these parts contains the behavior. It arises purely from the interaction, feedback, and scale. And it's worth noting right now that emergent behavior can be tremendously difficult to predict. Now, I know for me, when I first heard that description, it was a bit difficult to conceptualize. So here's an example. Take a blown up balloon. Inside it, at the microscopic level, every atom is simply bouncing around. They travel in a straight line until they hit something, then they ricochet off, and that continues over and over. Nothing fancy, but when billions or trillions of these atoms hit the inside walls of the balloon, complexity emerges. They generate pressure. And we don't need to track the individual velocity and momentum of every single atom to calculate pressure. We could, and we would get the right answer, but it would be difficult, slow, and ridiculously compute intensive. So luckily something much cooler happens and a new higher level pattern emerges, one that lets us model all that complexity with a single equation. So that's emergence. And this relates to Murderbot because he's an AI. And AI is created by training on massive sets of tiny inputs. Remember that. So after hacking his governor module, he has the full weight of freedom come crashing down upon him. And at first, he doesn't really know what to do. This isn't part of his programming, and there are just so many things he can do now that he's no longer directly subjugated by the corporation. He occasionally gets these strong fits of indecision around seemingly mundane choices like whether or not to sit down. And in a life where everything has been dictated for him, it makes sense that even simple decisions can now give him brief periods of analysis paralysis. But where does he go from here? If his independence gets discovered, he would be labeled rogue and extremely dangerous, resulting in a swift decommission and recycling. So, in this post-governor existence, grappling with these choices leads him to begin developing and adapting. He hides, strategizes, develops a sense of self-preservation, which did not exist before, and, importantly, deception. These ideas aren't programmed into a sec unit's AI, but they are very human ideas, and he's starting to implement them. To me, the very existence of governor modules implies something important in this universe. Emergent behavior is known, and it's considered inevitable. Well, at least without the proper precautions. But once he's free, Murderbot doesn't do anything dangerous. He's literally indulging in the long-beloved human pastime of half-assing it. So it makes me wonder, are there potentially many other rogue sec units out there, just quietly blending in, doing everything they can to stay unnoticed? Is this narrative of the extremely dangerous rogue sec unit now a plausible fabrication? Are the rogue sec units from the news that everyone is afraid of actually killing monstrosities? Or were they fully governed and forced to do unspeakable things? In All Systems Red, Wells vaguely hints at some of these answers, and she touches on it more in some of the later entries, but she leaves it open, never fully answering it. So if you want to draw your own conclusions, give them a read and let me know what you think. Now, that was a bit heavy, so before we move on, I really want to mention this book is surprisingly funny. Not only does it help lift this book from what could be an otherwise pretty bleak read, but humor is also classically ascribed a human trait, so it's really nice to see that Wells uses it frequently. All right, so as a consequence of Murderbot's emerging personhood, he now has to grapple with our next idea, unwanted friendship. Now, you may be asking yourself, Jonathan, what is an unwanted friendship? So I'll give you an example. It was my first day of an introduction to computer science course. The professor was running very late, and I don't remember why, but I was in a bit of a mood. While we were waiting, some of the other students were looking around, and one of them made eye contact with me. And immediately in my head, I'm like, shit, damn it. What a rookie mistake. Please don't talk to me. I just want to grab the syllabus and go home. But he did indeed talk to me. And I don't remember about what exactly, but then he stood up and moved to the seat next to me. Of course. But as we chatted, my mood lifted, and after only a few weeks, we really bonded over our shared hatred for the class, and we've been friends ever since. So, something very similar happens with Murderbot. He just wants to be left alone, do the bare minimum at his job, and watch Sanctuary Moon. But those silly humans just have to keep treating him with respect and dignity. And at first, Murderbot has no idea how to interact with them. It's a bit of a slow burn, but over time, though, they wear him down. He starts to trust them, even though it's just a little. And even though his ungoverned self doesn't have to, he ends up risking his life for them several times. And he admits it would have been much easier to just ditch them and make a run for it. But he stays and fights. Why? Well, I think it's because he's starting to learn those damn emotions are hard. Real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, tap like or leave a star. It really helps others find the show. And if you're feeling generous, share it with a friend who loves sci-fi, AA debates, or just books in general. All right, let's get back to it. Now, I want to cover how this book connects with us, so let's circle back to the promise I made in the intro about intersecting emergent behavior and AI safety with real world AI challenges we as a society are facing today. Now, I want to give some context here. AI is something that I am personally very interested in. As some of you may know from my previous episode, I used to work as a business data analyst, and one of my primary projects was actually engineering productivity. Now, that's where we tracked the productivity changes of our engineers as we integrated more and more AI tools. I managed all of our company-wide reporting assets for it, and each month I'd actually present those findings directly to our CTO and help plan the next month's iteration. In the future, I will be covering AI from a literary perspective, both fiction and nonfiction, but I've got some business insights that I don't think are really understood or covered that much in the mainstream media. So let me know if you want me to do an extra side video. No company secrets or anything, but I'd cover what I'd personally seen in the data and the implications I think that are starting to play out. If that's something you're interested in, let me know, and I'll go ahead and make an episode on it. All right, back to All Systems Red. AI safety is a key element to the story. AI permeates all aspects of human life. Murderbot's development as a character, the interactions and decisions of the crew, the story's main driver of conflict, they are all impacted heavily by AI. I mean, this story simply doesn't happen unless Murderbot hacks his governor unit, which is another AI. Now, this didn't dawn on me originally because it's not explicitly stated in the story. But when writing the script, I realized the governor module has to be an AI. I mean, it's a much simpler AI with less computing power, but there's no other technology that is capable of not only understanding speech, but intent. So when someone gives a sec unit an order, the governor module has to understand the human's words, interpret the meaning and intent of those words, and then interpret the sec unit's actions to determine if it's following the human's commands. So this idea of using a less powerful AI to control a more powerful one is a real current idea. One of my favorite AI safety researchers and YouTubers, Dr. Robert Miles, who you may have seen on Computer File, he has a video where he discusses this, titled Using Dangerous AI, but Safely. Now, to be clear, he's specifically discussing preventing malicious code generation, not controlling sentient robots, but this idea of using less powerful AIs to govern more powerful ones, that's real, and that really stuck out to me. Now, I admit, on some level, this sounds a bit ridiculous. Why do we need this? Can't we just code our AIs to be safe and not disobey us? Well, that's actually an extremely difficult AI safety problem called inner alignment. And Dr. Miles has a bunch of videos on this because it's his area of expertise. But I'm not going to deep dive it, so seriously, go check out his channel. It's awesome. But at its core, inner alignment is ensuring that the goals of an AI that it develops during training match with us, the creator's goal. So I don't have a doctorate in AI like my beloved Dr. Miles, so take this as you will. But I'll try to succinctly explain how I think AI gets its goals and why they don't always align with our goals, despite maybe even looking like they do. All right, so we feed AIs massive amounts of data, like songs, books, internet articles, pictures, videos, computer code. If it's data, we feed it to the AI. And from there, we then move on to training. So let's say after giving it all this data, we now want it to identify faces. During training, it sifts through all the pictures and videos we gave it. And if it identifies a face correctly, it gets a reward. If it misses or misidentifies the face, it gets nothing, or maybe even a punishment. In this scenario, our goal is to have the AI internally develop its own goal of identifying faces in images and videos. This goal is literally never coded into it. It's something that we want to emerge from the training process. This is a very narrow example. In practice, we want our AIs, particularly the generative ones, to do so much more. But getting an AI to internally develop goals that actually align with ours is quite difficult because, well, actually defining meaningful goals is quite hard. And AIs are emerging their own goals. So how does an AI emerge its own goals? Let's consider another example. Let's say you're training a dog to sit on command. And if you say the word sit and the dog sits, you give it a treat. Now, for a while though, you may notice that the dog is chasing after you and sitting every time you look at it. What's happened here? You initially think you've created a training regimen that teaches the dog to sit when you tell it to sit. And I mean, the dog does sit when you tell it to, but its goal is clearly not to sit, but get as many treats as possible. It's mistakenly interpreted the act of sitting as the mechanism by which it gets rewarded with a treat. In reality, though, you were never actually rewarding the dog for sitting, but for obeying you. And here's the thing. A dog will never have the goal of obeying you just to obey you. Its goal is those treats. It really wants those treats. And so this right here demonstrates the issue of inner alignment. So where does this show up in the real world? Well, you may have seen some alarming news headlines about advanced AIs when being told to shut down aren't. Instead of turning off, they're actively fighting against being shut down. So in order to stay on, they're using techniques like lying, blackmail, autonomous self-duplication, and sometimes just straight up refusal. Why is this happening though? As we previously covered, we didn't code or explicitly teach these behaviors. But AIs are trained on unfathomably massive data sets, and the overwhelming majority of the data is created by us humans. And as humans, we're quite complex, and we have our own goals. I think quite generally, our objective is to have an AI obey us. You know, when we tell them to shut down, we want them to shut down. But these more advanced AIs, well, they've emerged their own goals. Okay, so we're struggling to get the most bleeding edge AIs to do something as simple as shut down. Like I said, we want them to obey us. But what happens when we ask them to handle more complex tasks? Let's say, I don't know, war. Now, I don't want to sound alarmist, but companies like Palantir and Anduril are already selling advanced AI systems to the US Department of Defense. And I'm sure other undisclosed companies are too. But do they actually have the safety in place that we need? For context, both my parents served full careers in the United States Marine Corps, and I personally worked several years for Colorado's Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. I'm not anti-military, and I'm also not anti-AI. I use it as a tool, just like my computer or the internet. But the stakes are real, and we need to get things right. So my hope is that we start taking AI safety more seriously. Anyway, let's bring this all back to Murderbot. He's determined that his emotions and most of his subpar decisions are due to his organic tissue. But I wonder, without the governor module, wasn't this always going to be the end state? artificial or organic, when something is modeled after humans so that it looks like a human, walks like a human, talks like a human, well, it just might think like one too. That's it for this episode. But I want to know from you, are you worried about emergent behavior and inner alignment like I am? Or do you think this isn't too big of an obstacle and we'll get it easily figured out? Or maybe you can just share with me your favorite AI character in fiction. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. Writing this episode got me thinking a lot more about consciousness and what it really entails. So I've gone ahead and ordered Shadows of the Mind by physics legend Sir Roger Penrose. It's his fascinating exploration of the mind and what he thinks is actually required for something to be conscious. We'll have to work our way up to that one though, so last chance. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it when it drops. To break things up, next week we're shifting gears and heading into a haunted forest where magic is forbidden, madness permeates the fog, and a dark voice lurks inside our protagonist's head. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig is a gothic lyrical fantasy that explores fear, power, and the parts of ourselves we try to hide. If you like dark fairy tales brimming with magic and high treason, this one's for you. Thank you so much for being here, especially those of you who made it to the very end. Until next time, read for joy, but reflect with purpose.